What's up guys, my name is Natalie and welcome to my Nook of Novels. Today I am going to be talking about my reading goals for 2022 as well as what I read in 2021. So I want to start off by saying it is definitely storming very aggressively outside my house right now, so if you hear explosion-like noises, it's probably just the thunder, and if you're watching this, I most likely did not get struck by lightning. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just tell you guys all the books that I read last year. I'm also going to tell you guys what I rated them, but I'm not going to get into my thoughts on them or anything because we would be here for the rest of eternity. The first thing that I read was The Lies About Truth by Courtney, which I gave 5 stars. Then I read Beautiful Creatures by Kami Garcia and Margaret Stoll, which I gave 2.5 stars. Pattern Recognition by William Gibson, which I gave 2.5 stars. Broken Throne by Victoria Aveyard, which I gave 3.5 stars. The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness, which I gave 4 stars. The Ask and the Answer by Patrick Ness, which I gave 4 stars. The New World by Patrick Ness, which I gave 3.75 stars. The Wide Wide Sea by Patrick Ness, which I gave 4.75 stars. Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi, which I gave 4.25 stars. Furiously Happy by Jenny Lawson, which I gave 5 stars. The Driver's Manual, which I gave 3 stars. To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han, which I gave 4 stars. The Adoration of Jenna Fox by Mary E. Pearson, which I gave 4.5 stars. Monsters of Men by Patrick Ness, which I gave 4 stars. The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, which I gave 5 stars. Monster by Walter D. Myers, which I gave 3 stars. Scavenge the Stars by Tara Sim, which I gave 3.5 stars. Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor, which I gave 5 stars. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows by J.K. Rowling, which I gave 5 stars. Harry Potter and the Cursed Child by J.K. Rowling, John Tiffany, and Jack Thorne, which I gave 4 stars. Star Wars Return of the Jedi, Beware the Power of the Dark Side by Tom Engelberger, which I gave 3.5 stars. The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky, which I gave 4.5 stars. Snowscape by Patrick Ness, which I gave 2 stars. The Rotten Beast by Mary E. Pearson, which I gave 4.25 stars. The Fox Inheritance by Mary E. Pearson, which I gave 3.5 stars. The Call of the Wild by Jack London, which I gave 3 stars. Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor, which I gave 5 stars. The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, which I gave 3.75 stars. Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer, which I gave 3 stars. The Martian by Andy Weir, which I gave 4.25 stars. Ravage the Dark by Tara Sim, which I gave 3.5 stars. The Enemy by Charlie Higson, which I gave 4.25 stars. Fox Forever by Mary E. Pearson, which I gave 3.75 stars. That's Not What Happened by Cody Keplinger, which I gave 4 stars. Faith, Hope, and Ivy June by Phyllis Reynolds Naylor, which I gave 3.5 stars. Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, which I gave 4.25 stars. All the Crooked Saints by Maggie Stiefvater, which I gave 5 stars. The Red Badge of Courage by Stephen Crane, which I gave 3 stars. House of Salt and Sorrows by Aaron A. Craig, which I gave 4.5 stars. The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender by Leslie Walton, which I gave 3.25 stars. The Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater, which I gave 3.5 stars. Wild Card by Marie Lu, which I gave 3.5 stars. A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare, which I gave 4 stars. Rise of the Isle of the Lost by Melissa de la Cruz, which I gave 3.75 stars. The Dead by Charlie Higson, which I gave 4.25 stars. Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco, which I gave 4 stars. Brian's Return by Gary Paulson, which I gave 1.5 stars. War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, which I gave 3 stars. The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell, which I gave 3.75 stars. P.S. I Still Love You by Jenny Han, which I gave 4.5 stars. The Complete Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi, which I gave 3.5 stars. Grumpy Cat, the Little Grumpy Cat That Wouldn't by Steph Liberis, which I gave 5 stars. Coriolanus by William Shakespeare, which I gave 4 stars. Hamlet by William Shakespeare, which I gave 3.75 stars. A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, which I gave 2 stars. Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, which I gave 3.75 stars. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, which I gave 5 stars. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot, which I gave 1.5 stars. The Devil's Thief by Lisa Maxwell, which I gave 3.75 stars. Hell's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne-Jones, which I gave 3.75 stars. Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan, and the version that I read was illustrated by John Rocco, and I gave it 4 stars. Love Ruby Lavender by Deborah Wiles, which I gave 2.75 stars. Escape from the Isle of the Lost by Melissa de la Cruz, which I gave 3.5 stars. And lastly, Crank by Ellen Hopkins, which I gave 4.75 stars. And I also read 2 webtoons this year, which were Down to Earth and Socializing 101. So the total books that I read were 64. If you include the webtoons, it is 66. And the total pages that I read were 22,285. Now I have a bunch of kind of weird random statistics on here as well, but I think they're fun. The total AR points that the books added up to were 917. The total stars that I gave out for the books were 250.75. My average rating was 3.79 stars. The book I read with the most pages was War and Peace, which was 1,136 pages. The shortest book I read was The Rotten Beast by Mary E. Pearson, which was 12 pages. The average length of the books that I read were 348 pages. The book I read with the most AR points was War and Peace, which was 118. The book with the least AR points was tied between The Rotten Beast and Grumpy Cat, the little grumpy cat that wouldn't, and those were both 0.5 AR points. The average AR points value, I guess, per book was 14.5. And then I tallied up how many books of each genre that I read. And some of these are kind of subgenres of each other. Like I have one for magical realism and fantasy and dystopian and sci-fi, and I know that those are kind of the same thing, but I just think of them as different things, so I have them separated. So I read 11 contemporaries, 6 magical realisms, 2 historical fictions, 12 fantasies, 6 dystopians, 4 nonfictions, 8 sci-fis, 5 retellings, 5 classics, 2 horrors, 3 Shakespeare plays, and 2 webtoons. And I had some other things that I wanted to mention that were kind of within those other genres that I said. So I read 1 picture book, which is the Grumpy Cat one, 1 poetry book, 1 novella collection, 4 novellas, 1 graphic novel, and 15 audiobooks. And whenever I had reading slumps, those were at the end of January / the start of February-ish. And then I also had one in July and sometime in November. The books that surprised me the most were The Wide Wide Sea by Patrick Ness, The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, The Rotten Beast by Mary E. Pearson, The Martian by Andy Weir, House of Salt and Sorrows by Aaron A. Craig, which I actually read as a punishment book and I really enjoyed. P.S. I Still Love You by Jenny Han, Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, and The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, which was not a punishment book, but it was actually in my punishment bag because I wasn't really sure if I was going to like it or not, but I definitely did. I gave it 5 stars. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, the biggest disappointments were Monster by Walter D. Myers, Snowscape by Patrick Ness, The Fox Inheritance by Mary E. Pearson, The Call of the Wild by Jack London, Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer, Faith, Hope, and Ivy June by Phyllis Reynolds Naylor, The Red Badge of Courage by Stephen Crane, The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender by Leslie Walton, The Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater, War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, Love Ruby Lavender by Deborah Wiles, and Escape from the Isle of the Lost by Melissa de la Cruz. Now, saying that those were disappointments doesn't necessarily mean that I didn't like them. I just was expecting to like them more so than I did. And it's same with the surprises. Just because they surprised me doesn't mean that they were 5 stars, but it just means that I liked them more than I expected to. Now, let's talk about my reading goals for this next year. First of all, the number of books that I want to read are 65 because I set my goal for 60 last year, and I want to do this thing for the next few years where if I reach the goal, then I push it up by 5 books, and if I don't, then I push it down by 5. So since I read my 60-book goal, I'm going to push it up to 65 for this year. And since I read 64, I think 65 should be manageable. I have different amounts of time during different months to actually read. And so I didn't want to just say I'm going to read this many books per month and see how it goes, because that's not really realistic for me. So I divided it out into how much free time I expect to have for each month. But yeah, I will let you guys know at the start of every month's TBR how many books I'm actually planning on reading that month. So for January, I'm planning on reading 6 books. So when I originally decided on this, I thought that I was going to have more time in January than I actually ended up having. Nonetheless, I'm still going to try to read 6 books in January. In February, I'm planning on reading 4 books. In March, I'm planning on reading 6. In April, I'm planning on reading 4. And in May, I'm also planning on reading 4. In June, I'm planning on reading 8 books. In July, I'm planning on reading 7. In August, I want to read 6 books. In September, I want to read 4. In October, I want to read 6. November, 4. And December, 6. So my page goal for 2022 is going to be 20,000. And that might be a little bit low. I could probably read more pages than that, but we're just going to go with that. I would also like to finish 6 series in 2022 because I have a lot of series that I want to continue and finish with. And I want to read 11 5-star reads. I'm kind of trying to focus more on reading books that I actually enjoy. And so that's why I'm kind of incorporating the mood reading thing into this next year, where I'm going to spin the wheel as I read every other month, because I feel like that will make me less stressed about reading and more excited about it. I want to enjoy my reading as much as I can. So I would like to read 11 5-star reads and also 16 big books, because my TBR is starting to get more chunky books on it, and I would like to not be intimidated by those. I want to actually read them. I would also like to succeed in my Rainbow Readathon that I am hosting, which, if you don't know what I'm talking about, then I have an announcement video up that you guys can go and check out. But basically the goal for that is just to read 1 book per month with a certain color on the cover of it. And I would like to succeed in my Wheel of TBR at least 6 times. I was gonna make it 7. I feel like that might be a stretch, especially if I fail certain months, and then adding the punishment books onto my TBR for the next month makes it even more difficult to complete. So I'm just going to say that I want to succeed 6 times. And normally I have a big list of specific books that I want to read for the year, but I never actually end up reading those books. There's not really usually any rhyme or reason for those. I kind of just go, oh, I haven't read this book yet, may as well throw that on there, and there's not really a purpose to it. So I didn't really do that as much this year. The only thing is that I have decided that every summer I want to try and read the biggest book on my TBR, because that's when I actually have time to read some really big books. Right now, the biggest book on my TBR is However You Pronounce This Thing by Victor Hugo. So if this is still on my TBR by summer, then I would like to read this then. And the only other specific thing on here is The Rest of the Enemy series by Charlie Higson, because I've been borrowing this from my friend for well over a year now, and I would really like to finish the series up and be able to get these back to her. And lastly, some readathons that I would like to participate in 2022. I'm not really sure if these are happening for sure yet, because there's not been announcements for them or anything, but I would think that there's going to be at least one Bookopoly-thon at some point that I would like to do. And Whatever-thon happened last year, and it was so much fun, and I believe that that's happening again this year, so hopefully I will participate in that as well if it does happen. And I would also like to do at least 2 24-hour readathons this year. So those are all of my reading goals for 2022, as well as my reading stats and things like that from 2021. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe if you did, and hit the notification bell if you'd like to see the other videos that I post on Mondays. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.